Hi friend and welcome back. I'm Karla Lee with Voice4Kids and we are on podcast number 8 and talking today about grieving with your child. Voice4Kids, the raw, real truth of co-parenting through your child's eyes. I'm your host, Karla Lee, and it's time to hear their voice. Welcome to the Voice4Kids podcast. Hey friend, welcome back to podcast number 8, Voice4Kids. I'm Karla Lee, and I'm so glad you have joined me for this podcast because this one, it may not be a long one, but it's really important. It's called Grieving with Your Child. And the importance of grieving with your children is because as you walk through the process yourself with grieving, you're also understanding that your children are grieving. The same loss that you have is the same loss that they have. I said on podcast 7, you have to understand what a family breakdown is. It's not a parent breakdown. It's not a co-parent breakdown. It's not a separated parents breakdown. It's not mum and dad breakdown. It's actually called family breakdown. And when you understand what family is, and you know that means obviously the mother, the father and the children, the family go through the whole breakdown. And it's really important to remember it's not just you that go through these emotional times. So grieving with them, walking through things with them is really important. You would have heard me say on previous podcasts, and if you haven't, I'd go back and listen, but I'll just recap the story that was my process of grieving. And my grieving process was done in silence. Not the best way to grieve as a child. As I said, I was 9 years old and I was going through these struggles of grieving by myself. It was a very, very lonely journey. It wasn't easy to show my emotions. The reason that is because my parents didn't show their emotions. So it felt like it was an area that I had to keep to myself. It was very lonely and dark many times. I felt like I was trapped in a place of just having to deal with things myself. I couldn't tell anyone about it. I felt that it wasn't really a topic of discussion, and this was because the family breakdown that I was experiencing was lacking a lot of communication. And that is the key. As I keep saying on every podcast, communication is key. It is so important you're talking with your kids. So for me, the process that I had when my parents separated was, I've spoken about the time when my parents used to always come and kiss me goodnight. And my brother, so I've got an older brother, 2 years older than me, and we had this long corridor down to our bedroom. We had just a bathroom off to the side, but it was our own corridor just to our 2 bedrooms. And our bedrooms were exactly opposite each other. So the door was here, one was here. And the process that my parents used to do before they separated was they'd both walk down. So, you'd hear their feet walking down and say, my mum would say goodnight to me or my dad saying goodnight to my brother, and then they'd swap and then they'd leave. And this was the routine they did, all the time. And when it came to the time when it was just one set of footsteps, and I remember that one set of footsteps, and it was my dad's set of footsteps because my mother had a nervous breakdown. She, had gone to stay with my grandmother, her mum, and just live in a little granny flat at the back because she wasn't coping with the separation. And pretty much it got to the stage where she tried to come back and it didn't work. And all these things I found out when I got older. And my dad pretty much didn't want to leave the family home, so my mum had to leave because emotionally, the trauma and things that she was going through, she couldn't work through the marriage by living under the same roof. It just wasn't something, she was kind of over it way before. So she'd already shut down probably, I don't know, maybe a year or so before emotionally, but it took her a lot. She told me years later to walk away from us. Not that she wanted to walk away from us, but walk away from that family unit. And, it was very difficult for her, I found out years later. And the process that I had of those one footsteps was I realised that this was a reality. This wasn't just an overnight thing. When my parents said they were separating, it was legitimate because you're 9 years old, you're still trying to work out that when they say they're separating, what does that really mean? And I remember my dad kissing me goodnight. and going to my brother. And I remember thinking, wow, this is how it's going to be from now on. It's just going to be my dad coming into me and then going to my brother and then going. And I thought to myself, I remember lying in my bed thinking, I wonder how my mum is right now. I remember many, many nights thinking to myself, is she okay? Is she lonely? So who's kissing her goodnight tonight? She's probably lying there thinking of me and thinking of my brother, and she can't be here, and she doesn't know how to reach out to us because, it's late at night, we're going to bed. Like, I had all these thoughts going on in my head as a little girl. And I really mourned for her, like I even get emotional when I talk about it now. And this is so many years later, I'm 51. But it's like you get to that place where you become sometimes the adult for your parents. And I remember grieving for her every night in that pillow. And I kept thinking, is she okay? And who's kissing her goodnight? And, what is she thinking? And where is she right now? And is she lonely? And I always knew deep down like that she missed us. I never thought for a minute she didn't miss us because she rang us every day and she always checked up on us, and she was still a present mum. She was still there, with me every second weekend, but during the week she'd still do things with me and take me to places. So it wasn't like she had abandoned us. But I think my biggest concern in the moment, and this would happen for many kids, whether the mum's left or the dad's left, they'd feel the same emotion for that absent parent, is are they okay? Are they okay? Because I knew I wasn't, but I thought I have to be the big strong one here. I have to pull it together. I have to make sure that I'm not emotional in front of mum and dad. I have to make sure that I'm strong for them, because if I cry, they're going to cry. And I was so concerned about them being upset because I'm upset, that I felt that not sharing my emotions was protecting them. And that's actually the problem. Us children want to protect our parents by not showing how we feel, which is really detrimental to us as children, because we are then, instead of getting it out, like adults go to counselling and parents go to counselling and they get all this work done, and children just tend to suppress, push, and we push everything down. And as I said, when I got to 17, it was just like a wreck for me, So I remember at nights, when my dad would leave the hallway and he'd say goodnight to my brother, because my brother and I never discussed the family separation, never, and to this day I've never talked about it. Remember I'd have all these thoughts about my mum, and I'd roll my head over into my pillow and I'd just cry and cry and cry and cry. But I was silent crying. I said to people, it was like silent crying. It was like I was trying to really bury my head as deep as I could into my pillow, and as deep, like heavy as I could, like wrap the pillow around the side of my ears so that my brother wouldn't hear me crying. And I remember by the time I'd cried all my tears out that night, this was nearly every night, my pillow was so wet, the center of my pillow was just so wet. And so I then think to myself, oh no, my nose is blocked and my eyes are wet, and I had to find a dry part of the pillow to lay my head. So I had to try and find where on my pillow is it still dry so I can actually go to sleep, because I was usually exhausted by the time I'd cried every tear, and I'd try and put my head and it'd be right on the corner of the pillow, and I'd just be trying to go off to sleep. And I remember I did that for so long, I think honestly it was for a couple of years. I did that on and off, and that was my grieving process. It wasn't like I had counselling. I didn't have people coming around me saying, are you okay? I never had my parents checking up and saying, are you okay? I didn't have any of that. And I think, I talked to my mum years later, and she said because she felt like talking about it with me would be upsetting to me. So for her, as a protective mother, she thought, no, it's better I don't say anything. So that's why she didn't say anything. And she realises now that probably she should have asked how I was. These are learning things. That's why I'm doing these podcasts, to teach you what probably went wrong for me and what probably I needed, and how you can turn these things around for your children and do them differently. And so, to be honest, you really need to be transparent with your children. You need to be transparent with them. You need to check in on them. You need to ask them how they're going. Don't try and hide things. Don't put things under the rug. Don't just try and cotton wool everything. It's not going to help them later on. Later on, they're going to be asking more questions, but what happened here and what happened there? And Dad said, you said this, and Mum said, you said that. You could avoid all that from the beginning. Honestly, when they're teenagers, I know at 9 I could have probably understood quite a bit at 9. I know it's young, but I still could have understood some things. And teenagers obviously don't like it when you're not transparent. They don't like it when you're not telling the truth. They want honesty. If something's gone on in the family that was infidelity, or there was something that was quite alarming and they're hearing it from other people, they're going to be really, really ticked off if they haven't heard from you what actually happened. And as I've said this before, if you're not the parent that probably did the wrong thing in the marriage and the reason for the breakdown, and it was due to, say, as I said, infidelity, that's that parent's responsibility to sit down with their child and actually say, you know, I mucked up, I went wrong here, and it was my mistake, and these are the errors that I made. They need to be owning up to their mistakes to their children, especially teenagers. Obviously, young children, different. They have a different grieving process, and you have to be very gentle and speak a really, childlike terms with young ones. But they all grieve differently. Like little children, as I said, their grieving time could be acting out, playing up, and doing things like that. Teenagers, their grieving time could be also being rebellious and their behaviour in school and all those things. You have to look out for all these things and understand that the grieving process is very different. And you just need to give your children permission. Give your children permission to be open with you. Tell them that you're an open door. Tell them that you're there for them. Tell them that you'll listen to them. Tell them that even if they don't want to talk now, you are there anytime they want to talk. You must leave the line of communication open and make it very clear. I don't care if it's 11 o'clock at night. If you need to talk to me and it's urgent and you can't sleep, I'd rather you knock on my door, come in and sit on the bed and talk to me. They need to know that you don't see it as a hassle for them. You know, it's not like it's going to be, oh, what do you want to talk about now? Or we've already talked about that before. It doesn't matter. They still might need answers. There might be a question that they've asked. They don't feel like they've got the honest answer, or they might feel confused about the answer at the time. They just took the answer and then they've thought about it and thought, hang on, I've got another question with that. You know, I need to ask more about that. You're going to have to answer some of those questions. Obviously, you don't have to go into the deep nitty-gritty of a lot of the things because you don't put all your issues on children, but you have to give them something. Because I know for me, I needed something, and my children's book isn't my fault. As I've said before, it's because they're asking, is it their fault because they don't know the answer? And children that don't know the answer to things, they might get answers from other people outside of your family, and that's not the best thing either. So you just need to be open with them, give them permission to talk to you, let them know that. Because if you're just assuming that they know they can talk to me anytime, they know I'm here. They've always known I'm here. I've always said that. Doesn't matter. You still got to say it. They need to hear it, and they need to know that you are present, that you are listening, and that you are going to help them. And you need to also deal with your emotions. Deal with the feelings that you're going through. Deal with those emotions that you're dealing with yourself, because if you do not deal with your emotions, your children are going to find it difficult to grieve sometimes. And I've talked about that already, about grieving with your children in some of the other podcasts, about how you'll have moments where you'll be sad and your children are sad. But you need to, if your emotions are really out of control, like in a really big way, you might need to get some counselling, so that when you are having smaller moments of grieving and you're talking with your children, you're not to the point of absolutely a blubbering mess that your children are like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to help my mum and dad right now, and they might be freaking out a bit. And you don't want to be in that position where you're absolutely freaking out your children because you just can't control your emotions and you're really out of control. That's not a good way to be either. You need to know that grieving your children is sitting there and saying, you know, I've had some sad times, and I do think about the situation. I'm wondering how you are. Those little moments of like being, you might shed a tear with them when they're talking with you, but not the grieving moments where you're just, as I said, an absolute mess and you're inconsolable and your child's thinking, oh, and they need to put their arm around you and they need to check in on you all the time. I'm not talking about that kind of grieving, because that's where you might need some counselling. But make sure you are just having those moments with them, so you can say, let's walk through this together. Let's walk through this process together. It's not easy, and I recognize that you're going to have hard days and I'll have hard days, but we'll get through this together. And it's about reassuring them that you're on the same path with them. And you just need to learn to share your emotions. As I said, share emotions. And I believe that when you start to share your emotions, they will share their emotions as well with you. They will share them. They will actually feel like coming home and saying, I didn't have a good day today at school. And you might just say, oh, why is that? Just say, well, this happened. They might say this happened with one of the kids at school. But I was already angry before I went to school. Why were you angry? Just say, well, Mum was meant to call last night and she didn't call, and it upset me because she's let me down before. It might be something like that that's triggered something. Or, Dad was meant to pick me up yesterday, and I know I said I was okay, but, he always says he's going to be there for me at soccer and he's always going to take me, and he just keeps letting me down, and I was angry. And by the time I went to school and this kid said one thing and it triggered me. So there's all these things that can trigger. But the process of grieving it's a journey that you walk through with your kids. You're going to have moments where you have high moments and you have valleys. And I believe after separation, divorce, there's a lot of valleys. There's a lot of valleys, but as you walk through the valley and you walk through the process, a lot of the times you'll come out stronger when you do it together. Don't leave your children in a position where they're only walking through the valley on their own. Because during that time in the valley, as I've said before, who are they meeting in the valley? If it's not you in the valley with them, who are they meeting? What kids are they connecting with? Who are they talking to? Who are they on social media with? You need to check in on those things, because this could be the wrong influence. They could be doing gaming and you're not sure who's in that gaming, and that person could be leading them to another thing. You don't know about influences of drugs and alcohol and sex, and there's all these different things that grieving children can go through this process to try and feel loved. So you have to be very careful of where your children are entering into. Like when they're in social media, who are they talking with? When they're going out after school, who are they connecting with? You need to know the circle, because as I said, the grieving process has many different reactions, many different things come from it, but you yourself need to be a present parent. Know that your child is aware that you are open to them, that you are there for them, that the door is never going to be shut, that it doesn't matter what time it is, that you are happy to be that parent that will be there for them and give them the help that they need. If you think this is going to work overnight, it's not going to work overnight. It's going to take months, and it could take a year or so. But I believe the quicker you do it, the more active you are in this situation, the more present you are, you will see changes, and you will see your child become more open towards you. It will actually probably strengthen your relationship with them. The other thing is, you might find that the other parent is not really taking that time to do these things. Okay, you might be the one carrying this. You have to be prepared to be the one to carry this. If the other parent is not interested in having these conversations, if you can't speak to the other parent because of, obviously the breakdown, you have no communication, you can only talk through emails or an app, you can always ask that parent, just say, I have reached out to the kids and expressed to them that I'm there for them, and it'd be great if you could do the same, just so they know that if they're in your care, if they're in your care, that you are there for them. But if that parent is just not responsive, says nothing back to you, and says, oh, you do what you want to do with the kids and I'll do what I want to do with the kids, just let it go. Don't enter into it, and be that present parent, because you can try and push the parent to do all these things and it's not necessarily going to work for you. So just work on this yourself. While they're in your care, be that present parent, help them go through the process. And it's important that you just carry yourself in a way that shows the child that you are mature in this. When the other parents are reactive, don't get involved, because sometimes you might find the other parent becomes quite immature, and they might be like, oh, they're fine. They're fine, just leave them alone, they're fine. But you can see, maybe you're the primary parent, you can see all these reactive behaviours that are happening. And so you have to be mindful that no matter what, you step up, be the parent that they need. Yes, you might carry more of the load and it'd be very, very tiring for you, But trust me, at the end of the day, the children will know the parent that has stood up, stood in the gap, and been very present. So that is that podcast on grieving with your children. It is not a long one, but it's very, very important that you take on these steps and just understand that your children will always thank you for being a present parent in these situations, because sometimes we just see so many parents that just drop the ball. They just think the kids are okay and there's no grieving time. The parents get all the help they need and the kids don't get any. So our next podcast is podcast number 9, and it's about counselling for you and your child. So counselling for you and your child can be done in 2 different ways. You may get individual counselling, or you might find you'll get counselling to the point that you then can also counsel your child. And what I mean by that is you can get some tools through counselling or through just even listening to these podcasts, and it'll give you the tools that you need with sitting down with your children. Some children do not want to go to a counsellor. They'd rather hear information maybe from you, but you need those tools. So it's really important that you are a vessel that is going through a healing process, and you get to the stage that you are strong, that when your child is opening up to you, that you can help them, because one broken vessel can't help another broken vessel, okay? There needs to be a healing process that's happening with you as an adult and as a parent, so you can guide your child. So counselling for you and your child is the next podcast, which will be podcast number 9. So I just want to thank you for joining me on this podcast. I really hope you've enjoyed these tips, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next one. I'm Karla Lee with Voice4Kids. See you soon.